Okay, can call it to order, please. Welcome everyone to the Community Services Committee. Excuse me. Yes. Welcome everyone. Could it karakia, please, Sam? Yeah, Sam, please.
Morena, everyone. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai. Ihi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei, maurua.
Okay, we have an apology from Elizabeth and Phil, and Sam could be leaving early. Could someone move the apologies?
Yes.
Nicole and Malcolm. All those in favour? Yeah, it's carried, thank you. Okay, there's no there's conflicts of interest. There's no conflicts of interest. Carry on, but no public forum. We'll accept the terms of reference as written, and there's a confirmation of the last minutes. Would someone like to move and second the minutes? Sam and Malcolm. All those in favour, against, carried. Any conversation over that? No, we'll carry on. The chairman's report, I'll move as read. As the a mover and a seconder. A seconder, sorry. Sam, all those in favour, anything out of the chairman's report? No, carry on. It's going too fast. Executive Director's report.
Tēnā koutou katoa. The report I will take as written, but just in brief summary, the report touches on both the Piki Amakura and the Te Paipai strategy, and that lets the committee know that the draft strategies will be tabled in the council meeting in August for feedback from councillors. The Economic Development Strategy Council can expect to receive the final for approval on the 14th of August. In the report itself, it has touched on a couple of questions that were raised at the previous meeting. One was around alcohol licences and one was around public liability insurance. And so in brief, the alcohol licence it depends. So there's not a black and white answer in terms of when an alcohol licence is required. It depends, and that was the risk matrix was developed with input from legal advice, but also a meeting with the police and our own team in-house, looking at what are some of the considerations that would determine whether or not an alcohol licence was required, and that's the basis on which those decisions are made. So for your information, and there is a responsible host opportunity in some instances, but that's very, very few and far between. And the only time I've seen that applied is when there was a 50th wedding anniversary by an extended family group, and one member of the family brought along half a dozen bottles of wine to be shared. So that's the nature of what a responsible host type of an arrangement might be. It generally doesn't apply for the larger events. And there's also some questions around public liability, and the bottom line is, if it's not a council event and it's not taking place in a council venue, then it will likely require public liability insurance. There had been a few questions around that in relation to the Anzac Day event and parade, which we've considered, and we will speak to that when we present the Anzac Day report. You've been given a high-level summary of the customer experience survey that's just come out of circulation, and that's going to be presented in full to the Community Services Committee in August. And there's a schedule of the report still pending that the committee can expect. And in the Executive Director report, I just introduced the new Head of Venues and Events, Catherine Parker, but Catherine will be speaking to the Anzac Day report later in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a mover and seconder for that report, please? Malcolm? Grant? All those in favour? Against? Any questions of Denise? Aye.
At least let us say it.
Catch up. Grant?
I don't want to slow the process down, but I'd like to understand a bit more about the public liability insurance. Is that coming up further when we speak about it now? When's the
Speak
best?
about it now. Yep.
Is it something that we should build into our and offer as a part of the package and say, we have an insurance product and this is it, and you can pay it here? I'm guessing that it just seems to be a sort of incremental creep to more compliance all the time when you do anything with the council. And is there a genuine requirement for public liability insurance, or is this just overkill where we're getting so risk averse that we just try and do everything by insurance or opting out?
Yes.
I might get Stephanie to just speak to that. She will be more familiar with the use of public liability insurance. I'm also mindful that we're not the experts in terms of community services and facilities group. There is a team that specifically focuses on insurance and public liability insurance included, and so we get our advice from them. I think that the advice that we've had is that if it's a council-led, then we can legitimately encompass it within our public liability and insurance, and that's why we're looking to make 1 or 2 changes in terms of the Anzac Day parade, so that we avoid having to put in that additional onus on those organising it. Also, I think it's within the report, it does let people know that they can apply as part of their grant towards the cost of public liability insurance, and that's a legitimate request to be incorporated within a funding application. But Stephanie, do you have any comments around the public liability insurance and whether or not this is something that we've significantly increased in terms of our requirements of with that in the last while?
I think previously maybe smaller events weren't required, but I'm unsure why the requirements have changed at the moment. But we have made it available that groups can apply for funding for that as well.
So I'm not getting at you directly, but if you're unsure why the requirements have increased, the public's totally unsure. And I guess I'm just giving you some feedback from the community about our facilities, is that increasingly I'm hearing people say, oh, we don't go to the council facilities anymore, they're too dear, they're too hard to organise, and it just seems whenever you go there it becomes a problem. And so they're all incrementally going to other venues in the community, which is not what we as a council want to be doing, in my view. We want to make it as easy as possible. And just remembering that obviously the ACC was brought in to cover a lot of public liability issues around particularly personal injury. What is it we're seeking to cover here? What liability are we seeking to cover? And whilst I'm all about risk mitigation, I just want to make it as easy as possible for our community to use our facilities. And I think the feedback I'm getting, it may be different from other councillors, but the feedback I'm getting is starting to get a hang of it a lot harder if you want to run an event, particularly all of a sudden if you have to have council staff in attendance, and then security staff, and all these things which add a whole lot of cost to organising and running an event.
Thanks. Sharon, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you. I'm using Sam's because I'm not on. Yeah, look, I've been going around a number of residents' association meetings. I've been to quite a few now, and I'm hearing a consistent feedback. I was at Kirwee this week. I was Dunsandel a couple of weeks ago. And I don't disagree that actually we have to have a look at what our requirements are about public liability insurance. And I think that's a separate piece of work that we need to undertake, because it seems to be quite variable in terms of we've got 6 people wanting to ride the horses around Domain and Hararata, and we've asked for public liability insurance. So we actually need to understand why we're doing that. So I think we'll take that away as a separate piece of work that will be joint with the relative portfolio and council.
And just to add to that, it doesn't come into effect when it's within a council venue because our insurance does cover that. So that won't be it. It's more to do within the reserves and outside of a council facility. But I absolutely endorse the fact that it might be appropriate for Cameron's team to provide a report about public liability insurance and what it does and doesn't encompass.
Sorry, I think it's a looking across all of council, Denise, because
All of the-
I was given examples
all of the
actually
public.
this week of council facilities too. I've just not had a chance to catch up with you. I apologise.
Sam?
Yeah, does other people want to speak on liability insurance? Because I wasn't going, just change the subject.
Sophie?
I was going
I
to
was-
change the subject. But
Sorry, you go first, Sophie.
well, no, are you changing the subject?
No,
or you
no, I'm
work
not.
on alcohol
No.
as well.
No, I just want to understand where we are with our pony clubs, because we have pony clubs. Sphinxton Pony Club is on a reserve. And then we have, which we don't have management of, is the Waihora Pony Club. That's also on a reserve. That is under Dock Reserve. Then we have racetracks where we have jockeys riding horses. We have that they're still at Watakarara. That's a reserve we don't own. It's under Dock management, but the racetrack's there. Sorry? We've got golf. Yeah, you could just name the whole list of our users who use facilities that we have as reserves under Dock reserves or under other reserves that are sporting events. Are we going to charge the local rugby club limited liability insurance for using Sudley Park, which is another reserve that, we don't own? That's actually in private ownership. I can name a whole list that this is going to capture. If you're going to capture one sporting body, you'll capture the whole lot, because they don't all play at one venue. They move around, and some venues aren't owned by the council.
Thank you. I just note that this is a conversation that would need to include the team that manages the public liability insurance and the different insurances. So your points are noted, Councillor Hassan.
Yes, Sophie?
Sam's ahead of you.
Sam? Oops.
Okay, I was just going to raise community funding, the next piece. And Denise, you've sort of talked in the report about in November last year, we approved a recommended approach. And at the end of the point 7, you've asked, we've got the right principles in place around fairness, transparency, accountability and effectiveness. And so I guess I'm wondering, are you after a review of the work that was done in November, or are we looking at just the money that was handed out over the last 12 months or 8 months through till now? Because without wanting to open it all back up, I feel like I'm not quite sure what you're asking the direction from us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not entirely sure why those questions were there myself, but I guess for the purpose of clarity around the community grants report, some agreements have been secured from council through the LTP process and prior, and the council hasn't had an opportunity to see what that looks like in its full effect. And so the intent of the report is to bring it in its total visibility to council, so that it understands how this is going to work, what that means in terms of the principles beyond which it sits. I assume, but I don't know in terms of that particular question, that it might be that there might be an opportunity within that to see whether or not there's the council is comfortable with the principles that have been applied, and whether or not there's some others that should be added. But the rest of it is for the information and transparency to council about what it looks like, the new arrangement.
Okay, there was a couple of things then that I felt. So one was partnership, as far as some of the principles go, and is this about, we signed an agreement with Lincoln University last week. What part do the people and organisations that we've decided to strategically partner with matter about people connected to those organisations asking for us for funding? And does that or doesn't it come into the thinking? And then also things happening over and over again. So like annual events coming through, is that something that we want to support because we love them being there? Or are we supporting new stuff happening? And I just didn't see that in this framework. And I don't know whether that's the committee's decision or whether they're looking for guidance from this group to try and help that decision making, and then also the differentiation between supporting groups and events which have an outcome for the whole community as opposed to supporting an individual or a particular achievement for somebody. And although they're all good things, I'm not trying to say one's better than the other, but is that the type of feedback that you're wanting from today, or is there going to be another process to kind of nuts that out?
It's forewarning you of the opportunity to give some feedback, but the feedback that you've given will be taken into account. So we'll look at both partnerships, about things happening over and over again, and supporting a group versus supporting an event as part of what we bring back to you. So we will clarify what it is that the position in.
Thanks.
Yeah, mine was quite similar to Sam's actually, particularly around. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether we almost need a development principle. You'll know, like we do have a lot of groups that come back again and again, and sometimes for quite large sums. And potentially, like it would be good to build in for some of those. Like I'm not talking about the ladies knitting circle that meets once a month and has a cup of tea. Like that's all good. It's the ones who come back for an equestrian event for $5,000 every year, or who come back every term and ask for even for court fees for a netball group or a tennis group or something, and they come back again and again. You think, okay, where's your planning here? So do we need some sort of development thing, especially since as a council, we never seem to commit to increasing the value of the funds. And we know that the prices for everything are going up. We're not tagging this, or, it's not tracking with inflation or CPI or anything like that. And we're effectively creating a lid that's stopping any new groups or abandoning potentially the wrong groups, or because we haven't really got a framework that assesses that. Thanks.
The point around development is noted, so we'll be coming back to you in that form.
Okay, Lydia.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really keen to see the two particular pieces of work around the funding, because it's something that we always talk about every time we have the community services funding around what are we actually deciding here and where is our guiding framework. So I'm really happy to see that piece of work going ahead. And the other one I just wanted to talk about was the public liability insurance. Sorry, actually, I kind of see it as an unintended consequence of the dissolving of our community committees, because they would have been included under our insurance when they were committees of council. And so I guess I would really like to see that piece of work go ahead as well, because I thought maybe we would have seen some of our insurance decrease around the cover, because if we're not covering the 70 odd committees that we had across the board, that might have happened, but it hasn't. And so when you say that council gives $200, well, it could be $200. For instance, we had the example where actually it wasn't, it was more around the $5. And so what is the affordability for these people putting on events for our community? But yeah, and to apply for the money, I just see it as a money go round, which is I guess a little bit difficult to see, because if our community committees are having to apply for their hall hire and public liability insurance and all these other parts, I just think that we should have more of a meaningful engagement with our community committees.
The points are noted, particularly around the public liability and what needs to come back to the council in the term of a report.
Shane.
Thank you, Bob. Tēnā tātou katoa. I was just wondering whether, just under that public liability, whether Audit and Risk had done some previous work around that before. Potentially a good place to start. But good numbers, the ever-increasing numbers in our facilities certainly gives a great signal to, this information gives a good signal to where we're headed and where we need to be planning for. And I guess Darfield's a good example of that, with the swimming pool there, 25k up and a 10k saving. It's good numbers, James, and certainly bodes well for the future of what facilities we need and look like. I just wanted to give a thanks to the team for working with the Ellesmere Lions as well, with Tuna Sculpture and Mana Whenua in Leaston. But overall, it's a good report. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Okay, the third quarter report, Denise.
Just, I think that's what Councillor Epihau was talking about in that regard, and it really is just an opportunity to give you some context behind the numbers and to give you some confidence that we're tracking in a generally a positive direction in terms of the end of year results.
Okay. Do you want to carry on with the, this,
Yeah.
yes, we might as well, we can,
So just as part of that Q3
Yeah.
report, there is a couple of appendices. One is around showing you some of the promotion that's going on around some of our quaint community centres and halls that are suitable for weddings. It's also showing you some of the promotional material that's happening at the moment. We're working intensely with the schools in terms of some of those NCEA qualifications that young people can get, and if we can get the schools working together, then we can also potentially have other places for other young people to participate in those same NCEA qualification courses. And then just a schedule of what that means in terms of the upcoming reports that you can that this committee or a future committee can expect.
okay, thank you. Do I have a mover and seconder for these reports? Sophie, Malcolm, all those in favour, against, carried. Is there any discussion on these reports? Yeah. Okay, Lydia?
I just had a question around venues and events and where the unstaffed centres are. Do you think that you'd ever add Darfield Rec Centre to the unstaffed venues for reporting?
I'm just looking around to see if there's anyone that might know a bit more about it. I think it's a relatively low level of cover that's required by staff anyway. I think it's there's some complexities associated with the facility itself and who owns what part and how that all fits together in the future, and in terms of the building itself and its life. So there is some complexity associated with it, but I think there is a degree of flexibility about people being able to let themselves in and close out at the end of a session. So I don't think it's one that we have problems with in that regard. Do you see a problem, or have you had some feedback around that?
I guess just looking at the report, I'm interested to see what the numbers around that building actually are.
Okay, so we
And
could
so that-
easily bring that information back to
Yeah.
a future report to just profile Darfield.
Yeah. And just the other one was for just some clarification in the just number 8 there around youth. The 2 pool parties, I think that may need amended to Darfield and Southbridge around council hosting the pools. The Sheffield community hosted their pool party.
Okay, thank you. Noted.
Okay. Yep. Grant?
Page 34, aquatics. It says that we're going to do capital improvements at Darfield, Southbridge and Sheffield this off-season. I just thought that Sheffield was in a holding pattern until we decide the ownership. Is that...
Yep, improvements probably encompass stopping water running out of the pool faster than we can put it back in. That's about it. So we've got a little bit of money there to plug the gap in the bottom of the pool, and we'll carry on for the other season and hand it over, hopefully.
Same page, it's more of an interest question around provincial rugby games for both men and women in Selwyn. Is that to be held in Ralston, or where are they going to be?
One is in Ralston, one's in Prebbleton.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, if we can go on to the NZ report.
I just ask for clarification here, right? I am Secretary Treasurer of the Springs RSA. So I've always said that I have a conflict, right, with regards to having that particular role. It is an RSA.
Yeah.
But there is one thing in the report that I'd like to highlight, Springston Hall is missing from one of the halls that actually has.
Okay, we'll note that you've got a conflict for it if that's what you wish. For the-
Yeah, no, just carry
Okay.
on, but I wanted to make that correction with regards to Springston.
That's noted, thank you.
That's fine, noted, thank you.
So just introducing you to Catherine Parker, the new Head of Venues and Events, who's going to speak to you about the Anzac Day report. And just by way of introduction, Catherine, perhaps you spend just a couple of minutes giving a bit of background to what brings you to Selwyn and in this role.
Yeah.
For 17 years. Are we good now? Yes, so have lived in Rolleston for 3.5 years with my family and have come from a number of different roles, both working with Christchurch City Council with Venues Otatahi and more recently with Ridges, the EVT group, looking after various hotels and resorts in New Zealand. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm from, a strong venue management and events background and with strategy and sponsorship as well. That's my background. Yeah, really pleased to be here and do some really incredible things for Selwyn. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Catherine. So in terms of the report, Billy from in your team was the person responsible from Community Services and Facilities in terms of helping with the transition from the CE corporate office in terms of moving it into Community Services and Facilities. And if you want to maybe introduce anything of note about the report.
Yes, certainly. So I take the report as read. I think the biggest thing is it was really overall a successful event for Selwyn and Council. We worked really well with the organisers of the event, and there were some really well delivered events across the area. Yeah, any questions or feedback?
Yeah.
Shane?
Thank you and welcome. Just to say thank you to the council for your continued support of the service. It certainly seems to be a growing, expanding event. So it will be interesting to see what sort of where we go, how we continue to support this. But there was discussion around public liability and the overlap to these events, and what does that look like?
Certainly. So at the moment, it appears that they're actually covered by council with the council involvement in these in the Anzac Day events, so that they're actually covered, and any variance to that would of course be reported and discussed.
That's quite right. I think there was some confusion initially around whether or not this was a council event or not, and the decision was made that going forward it's definitely part of an Anzac Day parade. It's a council-led initiative and therefore is covered by the public liability insurance. That wasn't clear initially in terms of some of the original communication. So it will be going forward.
Sophie?
Yeah. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you very much for being here. And also, so I know that the feedback that I got from some of the Rolleston crew was that they found it really efficient and effective this year, like dealing with one person who responded very quickly, which was really good. So that's the feedback from them. My query on the report part is just a couple of things that I know will come up when I'm just reading this with somebody else's eyes, knowing the questions that they'll ask me. In terms of the bit where it says council to print programs for the day's events, so it mentions access to a computer and an order of service. It would be good to specify as well whether it includes that the council will be funding the cost of the paper and the printing, or whether they are expected to do that themselves, just because that is quite a significant amount of it, but it's not covered under access to a computer and a photocopier. So just to check that.
Certainly.
It's rather interesting around the road closures one. So not this, so this year, you may not be aware, the Rolleston one moved from being at one of our major intersections to the reserve,
Yes, I am
which was
aware. Yeah.
fantastic. And that probably saved about 13, 14 grand's worth of road closure fees. It wasn't the fees for that, it was mostly the fees for actually implementing putting the road closure into effect, so the traffic management people. So I guess the question there is, if in the section where it says road closures, the future budget allows for up to 3 traffic management plans, and all that, is that just the cost of preparing the plans? And again, the question then is, so do the organisers then have to fund the cost of people to carry out and the equipment around the actual road closure itself, or is it literally just the plan that the council is willing to fund? So
Certainly.
it's just kind of specifying that part. And I guess the last part is, I'm sure there's more than 700 people who came to the Rolleston one. It was huge, but I don't think anyone sat down and counted the numbers. We covered a good portion of that reserve. But anyway.
Yes, I certainly, with the numbers, there was some additional communication after this report was written that the numbers may have been around the 1,500 to 2,000 mark. It's quite difficult to determine when people are spread over such an area, but absolutely we can take that on board, and certainly I note the road closures information. We can make that really clear.
And just for your information, my understanding is that the budget provision is made for up to 3 road closures. So it encompasses the cost. If there is more road closures than is budgeted, that would start to put pressure on the budget itself. And I think that the point is noted in terms of the numbers, and there's often a difference between those who attend the parade and those who actually stay for morning tea afterwards. And so there's sometimes a bit of slip between the two as well.
Yeah. So going back to the road closure part there, it's got a total potential budgeted spend of 3 grand for over 3 road closures. So just saying, if for some reason, that needs to be communicated early back to particularly the Rolleston crew, because we would blow that budget out of the water.
Lydia?
It's really nice to see this report and actually get an overview of what actually happens elsewhere in our district as well, because I think that we're so busy running around in your own little towns that, we forget what I do, that there's actually other events going on. So it's really great to see all of them together, and a great report. I just wanted to add in that around some of the hall and community centre usage. And then I know that Springfield, Sheffield and Greendale halls were definitely used. And I can't comment on the Horata or Glenroy, but yeah, I think they're generally used as well.
Yes, some of them, Greendale, for example, we were aware of that quite late in the piece. And so we certainly want to do a lot more work around just making sure we're aware of every single hall that's being used and that everything's to a really high standard in all of the halls.
Yeah, cool. And that's where I think it's meaningful engagement, because the community is happy to deliver this themselves with council support. So
it shows that they're really keen, and it's such an important event for the community. So we want to support that.
Thank you. Thanks for a great report.
Nicole?
And welcome. Yes. Good to see you started full boots and all into your role. It's good to see. This is a minor thing, but it is actually a bit annoying on the day. So that we've got printed wreath cards and sent to service provider responsible for making the wreaths. In future, can we make sure that they actually attach those cards to the wreath? That was really bad. I mean, I was forever picking it up. And I also, when I actually physically took it to the monument, I had someone chasing behind me, picking it up as well. And that's really embarrassing, particularly when Sophie's talking about how many people were there, aside from the fact that I didn't really get called up. But anyway, and the road closures thing, I'm surprised that there's only for 3. And whether there was, with Rolleston before, there was actually only 4 that we were looking at. So I have in the past, and unfortunately I always because we always, when we have Anzac, we just keep going on, and it's good to have this roundup of what's gone on. My question is around Mead, their service, because I've been there some time ago, but their actual everything is along the road. And the time that I was there, there was a big truck and trailer unit came through, and Sophie's nodding. So you must, I mean, because this is, yeah. So it's very rural, but there is stuff that goes along there. And I was really kind of shocked that they had to go on the truck and trailer unit had to go on the other side of the road to pass us. And that was probably that, and there's only a handful of vehicles, but that's actually, you know, when people, it's a country road, might be something that we need to have a look at. And I'm sorry, I haven't brought it up before, but this, going through this maybe.
Just to clarify, so they're a bit more proactive around the Mead Hall and what plans there are or aren't, and whether or not a road closure is a requirement. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and just whether there's some way that it can be managed. But at the moment, the road is, and it has been some time since I've done it, but there was nothing on the road at all that I could see that would indicate that there was anything going on around the hall at that time.
Thank you. Yeah, just a query from me. Is it possible to add extra places into this? Because Glenroy, although they don't have it every year, they have it every second year, and we've never supported them. So I have been questioned on that. So maybe we should be looking at the future as well. Okay.
And Bob, on that, Arthur's Pass also isn't on the list, but held a ceremony this year that I attended, and it's on the roadside.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Glen Tunnelers too. You know, we've had trucks going the opposite way to the parade and things like that. So maybe they're just tidying up things that need sorting. Thank you. Okay. Would someone like to move and second the report? Nicole, Sophie, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay. Closing Karakia. Te Pou.
Inahia, Te Pou, Kia Wātia, Ai, Kua Wātia.